Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, to our first episode of 2025. We apologise, this is a day later than usual. This will be going out on the Wednesday as opposed to the Tuesday, but that's given us some extra time to reflect on what the podcast has done over the 2024 season. We've recapped some of our best bits with guests, some of our best reactions, some of our funniest moments. We've all compiled them into one massive episode for us to look at. Right at the end, it'll be just us two to recap what we've experienced at the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast this year and look forward to hopefully what will be a great 2025 ahead. But without further ado, play the clips from the 2024 DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. Let's start our journey through 2024. Where better to start than the Indianapolis 500 and Joseph Newgarden making it back-to-back victories at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. As I stated, there was despair for some, delight for others, so let's recap our reaction to Joseph Newgarden's back-to-back Indianapolis 500 victories. And as always at this race, it's delight for some, despair for others, and the delight this year was to Joseph Newgarden once again, who went back-to-back for the first time in 22 years. A driver goes back-to-back at the Indianapolis 500 for his first two wins. It was a long delay. There was a 4-hour delay or whatever it was, but I think the general consensus is it was very much worth the wait.
Yeah, I mean, what a day. I think I'm still riding that high. It was an incredible climax, obviously, with the last lap pass, turn 3 around the outside. So gutsy from Newgarden. It's a pass, I think, that will be replayed for the rest of the history of this great race, really. It was absolutely incredible. And yeah, it was well worth the wait. As you said, the green flag was delayed for over 4 hours. I can't really imagine what was going through the drivers' heads at that point. Just waiting, the anxious wait. But no, it was all the sweeter when everything did roll around. Obviously, all the pre-race ceremonies, the pageantry, as always. You know, back home again in Indiana, always gives you some goosebumps. But I don't think the leader was ever beyond the second clear at the front. It was just so tightly contested, and you know, it was a little bit of a crash-filled start or incident-filled start, but it ended with some real authentic green running. It was a real vintage ending to the race.
It looked at any given time that about 10 different people could win the race, and until the final 5 laps, it wasn't clear who was going to be in the shootout. Until the final literal corner, we didn't know who the eventual victor was going to be, and that is the great thing about this race. Whatever is said and whatever people may claim. Yeah, I mean, it was a really, really good race. I think maybe the start was a bit frustrating with all the interruptions. We didn't get any green flag pit stops for about 150 laps or something like that, which was a bit frustrating. But once the race sort of got into its rhythm, it was actually really high quality racing. It was a mix of strategy, a mix of daring moves, a mix of pretty much everything. Takes your breath away, this race, every year.
Yeah, I guess there's no better place to start than Newgarden, really, who, to be fair, was not a major factor in this race until it got to the sort of latter part. I think one thing that, you know, his acting strategist, Jonathan Duguid, said after the race is that they were kind of content to just be sitting 7th, 8th in the pack, save fuel, really just manage and methodically approach the race, as long as, you know, they were in the top 3 when all the drivers said it really ramps up in those closing stages. And Newgarden it was all about execution. That's such a watchword at Penske is execution. And, you know, Newgarden just kind of methodically, you know, he settled into the pack for a while, made his way forward, and then when it really mattered at the death, he was right in the position to just, as I said, make that incredible overtake. I mean, it's one of the greatest, boldest overtakes you will ever see. I mean, he was making some pretty bold moves kind of through the race at times, actually, on some of the restarts. He was, you know, I think there was one move, he went around about 4 of them. There was another where he passed, I think, Rasmussen, Ferrucci. But ultimately, yeah, when it came down, I think, to that last lap, his experience from last year maybe had an impact.
I mean, where do you end up with Newgarden? I mean, he'll go down as now one of the greatest to ever do it. And as much as I hated to see it, it was an absolutely incredible move around the outside, and one that will be remembered for years to come. It's as simple as that. It's one of those things where I don't think you'd ever see a move like that anywhere other than Indianapolis. It was on the limit. It was particularly brave because that's what, especially with the marbles that would have built up. Yes, I know the track got swept about 50 laps before, but there would have still been some marbles on there to go around the outside completely flat. Is pretty bold manoeuvre. So fair play to him. I mean, I'm sure he's absolutely loving it again. I mean, back to back is such an impressive achievement when you're 1 of 33, and to do it again, and it was almost similar to last year in the way that he didn't really see him in the mix. He sort of, yes, I know he was running at the front, but it always looked like McLaughlin was better, Rossi was better, Ferrucci was better, Dixon was better. But he just cycled his way to the front, and like it, everyone talks about how important it is. You just get in that right position for the last 20 laps. Doesn't matter how the rest of the race goes. As long as you're in the right position for the last 20 laps, you're in a good spot. And 2 years in a row, he's made the most of that good spot to win the race.
Yeah, I think, as I said, it was all quite methodical. I think they knew the whole time that they had the car, but they were just holding back, making sure they wouldn't, at the end of the day, we saw Rossi, for instance, he was pretty bad on fuel at the end. And, Newgarden was just during the race, making sure he was being efficient with his fuel by staying in the pack, far enough forward that he wasn't getting caught in some of the chaos. But no, with that move, I mean, he just said that he's going to you've got to put it all on the line, because that's what you've got to do if you're going to win at Indy. And he gave a lot of credit to Pato O'Ward. Actually, he called him a champion, actually. And I think, might be a good time to get on to Pato. I know you're not particularly happy about the situation, Dan.
Should we get on to my elephant in the room?
Go for it.
Oh, it's been a tough few hours. I don't think I've ever been so upset over sports in my life. I'm not sure I'll ever be so upset over sports again. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm really glad for Newgarden. I think he's a very deserving winner, and I take absolutely nothing away from his achievement. But at the same time, it's this sort of thing. It's a race where you don't get these emotions anywhere else, whoever you support. I mean, every driver will experience this heartbreak. Everyone will experience this sort of thing. But, I do feel for Pato. It's 3 years in a row. You could argue 4 years in a row. He's had 5 years in a row where it just hasn't quite fallen at the flag. It's been so close. Something's gone ever so slightly wrong that year. Something didn't quite work out that year. Something just played out of his hands another year. But I think this year was really one that stood out from the others, because we've seen him sort of, let's say last year, for example, the year before, he was consistently at the front. He was consistently in the pack. But I think this year was just so different in the fact that his race car wasn't good. He's mentioned for weeks he's had this inherent issue. I think he mentioned in the press conference he's had a fever all week and he's been recovering from that. He got cycled down, I think, 9 places in the pit stops. He's running about 20th the majority of the race, and then through good strategy, credit to McLaren, through a bold strategy, they got him out there. They got him in a great position, and it just didn't quite happen. He did so well to cycle his way up. I think some of the comments he made is, I don't know how the car got through some of the corners that he tried. I think he noted Rossi and Dixon, the moves he made on them were out of his comfort zone, almost as out of the car's comfort zone, and he put himself in a position sort of against all odds, considering how his month's gone to date. And there's always going to be the argument, should he have rated for turn 3? But you sit in his position. It's the last lap of the Indy 500. Of course, if you get an opportunity, you're going to go for it, because let's say he doesn't get the opportunity out of turn 3. I mean, you would absolutely be kicking yourself. And I think he should leave Indianapolis with his head held very, very high, because it's not one like last year where maybe he rushed it a little bit. It's not like the year before where he was too conservative. He gave it his absolute all, and nothing can take away from the performance he put in, because I literally don't think there's anything else he could have done. He sort of faced adversity all week long, and despite that, brought home a really impressive result. And I don't think we've ever seen him quite like the way we saw him pro race. He was quite literally in tears, reflecting on yet another close call. But he mentioned the likes of Helio Castroneves, the frustrations they've had. Yeah, I know Helio's are slightly different, but I know Tony Kanaan came to speak to him, and Kanaan is someone who's had such a similar experience, just waiting for that first win. And I'm sure it will come. You don't be in contention 5 years in a row by pure luck. And I think as I said, he should leave his head held very, very high, because it was an almighty performance. as you guessed by the previous clip, it was despair for me after the Indianapolis 500, but that soon turned into delight after Pato Ward's victory in Mid-Ohio. And let's see my intro after Ward's victory. And most importantly, this is the episode I've been waiting for a long time. This is the episode you've been waiting for a long time. So I hope you enjoy this episode, because it's probably one which has been a bit too long overdue. It's finally the one where we can review a Pato Ward race win for the first time in too long. We're not counting St. Petersburg because that wasn't a win, because New Garden would have won it anyway. Let's be completely honest here. So we finally have an award win to actually review, and it was a bit of a slow burner, but we ended up with quite a nail-biting finish, and we ended up with, I think, quite an important award win in many different aspects. You know, the championship, his own confidence, and for McLaren's results. So a very exciting win for me personally, but in the overall context of the championship and various other things, I think it's quite an important win in many aspects. And of course, after Nashville, we had Alex Palou as the 2024 IndyCar Series champion. And let's go through me and Archie's reaction to Palou seeding a third title in 4 years. And we, more importantly, have a champion to look back on. Alex Palou claiming his third IndyCar championship in 4 years in the season finale at Nashville. I'm not going to say it was inevitable, but, you know, all year Palou looked fairly comfortable. It looked like this championship was going his way. It is a bit of a shame how it ended. Will Power's day pretty much done after about 10 laps due to a seatbelt failure, which basically gave Palou the opportunity just to drive home to a third championship. But it doesn't take away from the fantastic year he's had, a fantastic race we've had at Nashville. But Palou on top again, as I think we all sort of thought at the start of the year, and we all thought coming into Nashville, and he's building a bit of a legacy as an IndyCar great. He certainly is that now with 3 championships. He joins some of the very big names of the sport to have those, and a worthy very champion of our 2024 season.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible when you try and put it into context. I mean, he is, 27 years old, and he's halfway to Scott Dixon's tally already within a 5-year period in the series, within 4 years at Chip Ganassi Racing. And obviously the 1 year he didn't win the championship was obviously the year where all the off-track distractions were kind of ramping up. It's incredible. I mean, yeah, of course, Power was kind of in the fight, but it was a long shot anyway. Obviously, he had to kind of finish first or second, really, to stand any sort of chance and rely on Palou having a very, very poor day. So he's a deserving champion. I think he spoke after the race that it was probably his most consistent season yet, apart from maybe it tailed off a little bit in the last few rounds. But as we kind of spoke about, there was a run. Yeah, he pretty much finished top 5 every single race, unless he fell into a little bit of strife that largely wasn't out of his control, aside from the Iowa crash. So, yeah, 11th place was actually one of his worst finishes.
Yeah, I think that was Palou's pretty much most disappointing performance of the entire year. We didn't really see him at all. He's pretty much sort of fluctuated around the top 10. But yeah, he wasn't at the front like he normally is. But hey, doesn't matter. I think at that point he was already half in party merge when he found out that Power had to pull over. So it didn't really matter in the end. But yeah, I mean, the stats speak for themselves. He's got 13 top 5 finishes in the 17 race season, which is so impressive, as you said. The last 2 rounds weren't great. Admittedly, Milwaukee wasn't really his fault. And look, it wasn't as dominant as he was last year, but this year was more consistent. And, you know, we have seen a bit more of a human side to Palou where he does make mistakes. He can have off days, but because he is so consistent the rest of the year, he's almost unbeatable at times. And he'll go on this run of form where he will just pick up result after result after result undeniably. And it's what makes him so great. His calmness, his demeanor, you never see Palou worked up or stressed. He's always so calm in the car, and that's what brings him results. And as you said, the week Power sort of highlighted this. Palou is so good at finding the balance of knowing when and when not to do things, because you don't see Palou make silly overtakes or regularly throw it in the wall, but you neither see Palou stuck behind cars and having an off day. And he's so good at finding that balance, which is potentially the biggest factor to him winning these titles.
Yeah, I actually find it's strange that he's probably put in his, I don't want to say worst performance of the season, but yeah, I think, as you said, maybe most anonymous to wrap up the title. I guess he probably could have delivered a bit more if he really needed it, and Power was still in the race and Power was leading the race, for instance. But it's weird how the kind of focus of the race just completely transitioned after Power had his issue, and all of a sudden, the battle at the front was the thing that had our attention. And I didn't really think of Palou that much until the end of the race, which I guess was a bit of a shame, because there was some genuine excitement, I think, before the race, that given how far apart they were starting, that I mean, we could have, still unlikely, but some sort of battle. But no, I just completely echo everything you said, really, that I think it is this kind of, he's ruthless in his own way, Palou. He's ruthless in a way that's very measured, that's very, I guess he knows where to take risks, knows where to play the percentages.
Let's look back at maybe our favourite moment of 2024, and that was back at Alabama, with Georgina flying from the skies and almost sticking the landing in the most bizarre moment of the IndyCar year. Let's look back at one of the funniest moments you'll ever see in IndyCar. I think we'll move on to the funniest moment of the weekend. I don't think this needs any introduction to what's going to be picked here. Possibly the most bizarre moment in IndyCar history. I think Barber must have a trend of having really weird moments. If you've never seen this before, the recovery vehicle once fell on its side in 2019, which was quite funny. But I think that was topped this weekend by a mannequin falling on the side of the track called Georgina. And the way it just sort of falls down, its skirt goes down with it, and it just collapses on the side of the track, falls from the bridge, to make clear. It's quite simply unbelievable.
I've been losing my composure at seeing tweets pop up on my phone, notifications throughout this recording. It's managed to make its way to the media centre, and Scott McLaughlin and various other people have been posing for pictures with this utter just legend of a fake figure of a person. And it was just, I think, the funniest thing, and apparently James Hinchcliffe completely lost it in the booth. I'd love to see a clip of that. It was like the way it almost stuck the landing, but then falls over. When you first see it, it's a little bit alarming when the camera first cuts to it, and you think, "Oh my God, what is this?" But obviously, like, if you know Barber's a track, it's just littered with mannequins. Why there's one on top of the bridge going over the track, we'll never quite know. Poor Georgina got her hand ripped off by Luca Giotto. That's quite something to have in your first IndyCar race.
For Giotto, if he only ever does 2 IndyCar races, at least he'll stay long in the memory.
That's a great point. He'll be an IndyCar folklore forever. But Will Power was, oh my God, he was hilarious afterwards. He said that it would be funny if it ended up in somebody's cockpit and attacked them, basically.
It's one of those IndyCar classic moments where it's, you can't describe it. Like, it's just so random. And a lot of the drivers thought, obviously it came at a similar time to Robb crashing, a lot of people thought the caution was for this mannequin landing on the side of the track. If it landed 2 meters to its right, I think we would have had a caution for a mannequin on the track. Some of the best episodes through the course of 2024 is when we had the drivers on the IndyCar podcast, and we were delighted to be joined at the very start of the year by Callum Ilott, who'd recently been dropped by Rinus Racing. Let's get Callum's thoughts on his departure, as well as move to the World Endurance Championship. So looking forward to next season, obviously you're making a change to the World Endurance Championship with Jota Sport. Obviously the news of you leaving IndyCar was quite late on the driver market. So was it a case of you wanted to stay in IndyCar, or was WEC the right option, the right time, like it was when you joined IndyCar?
No, I was more than expecting to stay. There was no kind of option not to stay, if you know what I mean. I was always convinced, if you'd asked me 2 months ago what I was doing, well, it's probably just over 2 months now, I would have definitely expected to be staying in IndyCar. There was no kind of doubt in my mind. So it was a bit of a surprise. And then, of course, came to an agreement to split and move on. And then, I explored IndyCar and kind of wanted, that was my first goal, to stay in IndyCar. But with what was left available and the nature of what was needed for those seats, I wasn't, or not that I wasn't an option, it's just I'm not the top option because of the nature of those seats. That's not to say that if I'd have known another month or two earlier, even a couple of weeks earlier, actually, there would have been options. And for my type of driver, should we say, that I wouldn't have had an issue, but that wasn't the case. So I had to look at other things whilst kind of seeing if those options are going in the right direction. And I explored on the endurance side, because obviously I'd done it a little bit in 21, and Jota knew that they were going to have one opening, if not two, within within the now 12 car. And I the more and more I looked into it and understood it, the more I realized how good of an opportunity it is and could be at the time. And we moved very quickly after the Bahrain event. Unfortunately, not quick enough to make the test at that time, but very soon afterwards to get things going. And I like a lot their idea, their mentality, their openness, and like a simple thing. They encourage a racing driver to do as much driving as possible because that's the nature of it. And so, for me, it's quite nice to just be able to have something that I can prioritize and in a very good position, and to be able to explore other things of what I want to do without having to worry too much.
We now know that Callum will be returning to IndyCar with Prema in 2025. However, Callum was looking at opportunities as early as the start of 2024, and here's a bit of foreshadowing, which has soon turned out to be true.
We want to see you back. A lot of people want to see you back in IndyCar as well. So, first of all, looking at 2024, are there still options on the table, whether for part-time or an Indy 500, whether that be as a fill-in or when there aren't clashes with races in WEC?
Yeah, I think to say if there's options on the table, I don't know, because I'm not the one in control of any of those, in the sense it's not like there's something paper there and I just have to sign it. I think there's got to be some things that happen on other people's sides to kind of see how that works. But I was definitely going to go to some of the races, try and go to St. Pete, the 500 if I don't end up driving straight away, and go there as kind of reserve, enjoy it, chat to a few people, and then see later on. It sounds quite bad, but normally if something happens, it happens around the 500. So it's not a bad place to go as a reserve. And obviously I don't want to gamble on anyone's misfortune, but just looking realistically, as if you're going as a reserve, it's the way it is. And then probably a few races beyond that. I have the ability, I think, to go to maybe 9 or 10 events within IndyCar. Who knows if I do all of those, because that would be quite a lot of money to spend to go to every single one. But yeah, I think the 500 I definitely want to do. Just how I do it, I don't know yet. I think I was so busy with obviously all the stuff, then all the WEC stuff, because I went to go and test the car in Qatar. So I didn't really get round to prioritizing, a one-off IndyCar race yet, and seeing what the opportunities are. Maybe it's even one of those things that you just kind of wait and see. Who knows? So I don't know. I need to get around to it, but it's Christmas as well, and my priority at the moment is to do WEC and get the best result in that.
Later on in the year, we were privileged to be joined by Kyffin Simpson on the podcast, and Kyffin experienced his first Indianapolis 500 and Le Mans 24-hour this season, but his call up to Le Mans was a bit unorthodox. Here's Kyffin's tale of his story to getting called up at Le Mans, because obviously you made your Le Mans debut this year. So just first of all, how did the call come around? How did the opportunity come for you to go to Le Mans?
Yeah, it was pretty random, actually. They messaged me on Instagram asking if I wanted to, if I would be interested in racing with them in Le Mans. And I said, well, yeah, I'd be interested, but I do have this conflict that was at the time the Milwaukee test that I think was on the Wednesday, which was the same day as the drivers' meeting. So I wouldn't have been able to do both. We worked it out, and we were able to get the exemption from the test, and I was able to go over there and race at Le Mans for the first time, which was actually very funny because at the beginning of the year, I said one of my goals was to race Le Mans, and that ended up happening this year, which was pretty incredible. So I'm very happy to get to do that for the first time, and I was a little bit sad that we couldn't perform a bit better, but we were very quick and had a great time anyway. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And as I said, it was the first Indianapolis 500 experience for Kyffin Simpson. So how does he reflect on the month of May?
Kind of getting into key moments from this year. You obviously made your Indy 500 debut. That's kind of the race that everyone thinks about. You made it nicely into the field, raced well. how was that experience? Can you just kind of take us through as a rookie how that whole event feels, both on and off the track?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I got to experience it the last 2 years just on the sidelines watching everyone else race, and being at that track on the grid before the race is just an incredible feeling. Like, you stand out there and there's 350,000, 400,000 people all around the grandstands, and it almost feels claustrophobic with how many people there are on the grid. But it's just the coolest feeling to walk out through Gasoline Alley and see all those people on the grandstands, and then going into turn one on the first lap and you see all the people in the grandstands, and yeah, it's just incredible.
And you talk of going into turn one. What is the feeling like in the car when you're going at those speeds at up towards 240 miles per hour? What is that feeling? Because kind of the regular human mind can't really comprehend that.
Yeah, it's insane. When you turn up the boost for qualifying is really where you feel it, because you're just one car on track and you've trimmed the car out as much as you can. And all through practice, you're going like 220 by yourself. And then you show up for qualifying and you've trimmed the car out and you've turned up the boost. And as soon as you turn to that quali mixer, it just takes off, and it's the craziest feeling. Just such a cool experience.
Whilst it was an unforgettable experience for Kyffin Simpson, the month of May was a lot tougher for Nolan Siegel. Siegel was the unfortunate one to be bumped from the field in May, but a few months later, let's see how Siegel reflects on his month of May and what he's going to do going forward.
I guess the biggest, or at least one of the biggest experiences of your season so far has been the Indy 500, obviously. I know you didn't quite make the cut for the race, but I think everyone would say the effort you put in was pretty valiant, especially bouncing back from the crash you had on Fast Friday. So can you just take us through that experience and the emotional roller coaster that you had back in May?
Yeah, it was one of the most difficult, months of my life, for sure. We knew it was going to be difficult going in, right? Obviously, it went a little bit worse than anyone had thought. But at the end of the day, I think for me, it was super valuable. I learned a huge amount from it, and I don't regret it at all. If it makes me better and I get the opportunity to go for it again, I'm going to be better in 2025 than I was in 2024. And I've had a lot of times this year that I've kind of been thrown into the deep end, and that was certainly one of them. Look at it, learn from it, and move on from it. I don't think there's really anything else to do.
If you haven't seen it, Nolan Siegel's got a very cool Nomex suit with a massive seagull on it. If you haven't seen it, go and search it up on Google. It's one of the coolest things I think I've seen. Here's a story of Nolan Siegel's seagull outfit. I've got to say, I love the seagull, was it?
The
Underlayer. Love it.
How did that come about, that fire suit?
So, my longtime kind of like spotter, coach, manager, he runs the US division of HRX, the suit and Nomex company. So he's always kind of made me like joke Nomex and suits just for fun. So like for Christmas, I'll get a funny shirt. So it was just a joke.
We would then be joined by Toby Sowery, who made his debut in IndyCar in 2024 at Mid-Ohio. However, Toby's career path has been a very difficult one, and trying to get sponsorship has been an essential part of his career. Toby reflects on the importance of the business side of motorsport and a fascinating insight into his racing journey.
Obviously, there are such limited opportunities to become a paid driver in a series like IndyCar. Can you just kind of discuss the challenge and kind of just the importance of really attracting partners, attracting sponsors? I know it's kind of a huge thing that's always discussed around motorsport. I think it'd be good to get kind of you as a driver's perspective on the work that is kind of undergone and the processes you have to undergo to get these partners on board.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to how I've had to get here. I've got a single mum and a single dad, and they've kind of come together and helped as much as they can to give me the opportunity. So it's not like we've just had the money to go and race. So we've had to be smart with it, and we've had to learn from a very early day how the kind of business of racing works. And it's something that my mum taught me from a very young age of racing's a business. It's a sport, but behind the scenes, it's a business. So she's a very switched on woman. She's from London, well, not from London. She works in London. She's a city woman. She understands businesses. So she's been fundamental in kind of molding our minds to understand what companies want and what they get back out of racing, and something that is achievable, rather than you give me money, you get a stick on the car. No one's interested in that anymore, especially when money's so tight for people. So it's been about kind of having a product to sell as well as that. I mean, you've got to be personable, you've got to be likable, you've got to be friendly, you've got to be fast. There's a lot of elements that me as a driver has to do, as well as understanding how sponsorship works. And I think that's really the reason why I'm here, kind of having that understanding. So again, over the winter and over the summer, we've been working with people to kind of figure out, how IndyCar is as a selling point, and figuring out where and what and who we can target to bring on as a partner, not a sponsor. But I can't really summarize it as a whole because I'll be here for hours. So it's a difficult process, and it's one that a lot of drivers do fall down at that hurdle, not because of they're not good enough or they don't understand it, but because it's just such a difficult game. That's limited, No one's gonna spend 10 million a year for the next 20 years just so their kid can race. Like, it's just, unless you're obscenely rich, it's not something that is sustainable. And I think that's a big thing that these days, everything is sustainable, and break away from that pay driver is difficult. But again, I think pay driver and bringing sponsorships a different kind of ball. But again, there's teams out there that have the means and resources to pay you, and they have those business and B2B, packages that they can find a way for you to become a paid driver. So I think getting in, bringing the money and the sponsorship, and then being a marketable enough driver that, be fast enough, get podium results, and do the job on track, but also be able to be a sellable item off track is really, how you break away from that, becomes something that people will pay you for.
We were fortunate enough to be joined by Louis Foster several times throughout the course of the 2024 season. First of all, just as he was about to seal his Indy Next championship, and here was Louis' reflection on how important that Indy Next title is to his future career.
We're pretty much in championship mode from St. Pete onwards. I think you said you weren't taking huge risks that weekend. How critical is it to win the championship in this second year for you, with everything that's associated with a scholarship? And does that reward kind of add any pressure for you, or is it just an important thing that you're really working hard to get towards?
I think if I didn't win the championship this year, it'd be in the end of my single-seater career. I don't have the funds to go up to IndyCar without the prize money, and even still, it's already hard. So yeah, I think it's super, super important this year was for me. It was a lot of pressure. I think we just, as a team and myself, we just took it one step at a time. I knew that we were the fastest. I knew that we were on our day. If nothing went wrong, we would be the fastest car out there at majority of the circuits, which has been the case this year. So I think when those first 3 rounds kind of happened, and we were, we weren't looking too bad on points, but we only have 1 podium in 3 races. It definitely was not the best of things, but I knew that it would turn around because it had to, and I knew that we would make it work, and we did. So, there was no desperation, which is hard to do when there's so much pressure.
And just a few weeks later after this interview, Louis joined us again just after he was announced for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. After the announcement, let's look back at Louis' reflections on finally making a step up to IndyCar. And just to round off on sort of a more serious question, I guess almost your whole life has been dedicated towards this. So how satisfying does it feel to yourself, your family, and all the partners who've been there with you, who've invested so much time, effort, and money to sort of get you to this stage, and now you're at the stage where you're a professional racing driver? Sort of, how do you reflect on that?
Yeah, it's difficult, really to kind of put into words, just to get it done and to kind of be able to call myself finally a professional racing driver, and to have made it to IndyCar, which has been my dream for a long time, as long as I can remember, really. Super thankful to everyone that supported me, especially my family, especially sponsors who have been with me for many years, like Copart. Yeah, it's obviously a dream come true. I think my mindset now is, obviously we've had these last couple of days, obviously I've been signed for a while now, but with the announcement and then the finalizing of the signing, it's been ecstatic, but the goal now is fully on preparing. I think it's definitely hard to get into IndyCar, but it's just as hard to stay, in my opinion. I think it's super important to be able to reset as a rookie again, and be humble again, and really understand that it's going to take just as much work, if not more, to stay here and to be successful here as it took to get here in the first place. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, there's a lot of these good drivers in this grid that if you put them on the Formula One grid, it would surprise a lot of people. These are extremely good drivers, extremely competent teams, and you've got to give it your A+ game, otherwise you're going to fall off. So for me, my mindset is already fully on being competent in IndyCar. I think getting to IndyCar is a dream, but that's not the dream. The dream is to win IndyCar.
And Louis must have clearly been hot property in this exclusive little nugget he gave us during that interview.
And was it a case of you having like multiple different options on the table, or kind of was it ever at a stage where you were thinking, okay, if this one thing doesn't work out, then there's doubt now over, whether you'd be in the field, or were there kind of multiple things on the table for you?
Well, funny story. About half an hour before we got announced, I got text from a different team manager asking about things. I was like, "Oh, well, sorry, buddy, you're gonna find out in obviously half an hour." But yeah, so I think there were other options. Don't know where they would have gone and what those deals would have looked like. But at the end of the day, I wanted to be in IndyCar. I wanted to get it done as soon as possible. I think from my perspective, Rahal was the best option that was available.
Hunter McElrea was the final driver to join us in 2024, and he's a fascinating insight into the brutality of motorsport as described by Hunter himself.
And kind of in those 2 months that you speak about, like, what is your mindset? How are you staying positive? Is it hard to kind of stay positive during that period when you've got this dream and kind of it's just within your grasp, but the opportunities just aren't there? What is your mindset during that period?
Man, it was crazy. It was so crazy. Like, it's so hard to stay positive. Like, for me, racing is what I love so much. And something I've dedicated my life to. So for me, the biggest fear was like, obviously, number one, I wanted to race, and IndyCars was what my goal was, and obviously still is, or it always probably will be when I get the chance. But it was just like this uncertainty, and it's just so hard to be positive when you're like, maybe I'm going to be on the couch all year. And I saw Linus had what he went through, obviously had a great ending to that, but what he went through, it was like, man, I guess it's a big possibility I'll have nothing. And that was scary. So it's hard. I mean, you can't feel too sorry for yourself, but at the same time, it wasn't easy.
2024 was clearly a whirlwind of emotions for Hunter, especially in this clip here, as he speaks about how he almost got an IndyCar call-up earlier than expected, and then he reflects on his first test with Dale Coyne Racing at Mid-Ohio. So going on to sort of the IndyCar stuff, we know you got your first opportunity in Mid-Ohio with Dale Coyne for the test. So first of all, how did that opportunity come around for you?
It's funny. It's kind of, again, I feel like I'm always saying it's a long story, but obviously this year I had a lot of downtime in between races, and I would spend that flat out trying to get an IndyCar drive, and I would have zero success with it. It was impossible, it felt like. But there was a time earlier in the year I can't really say, I guess I'm going to give you guys the inside scoop here, but I haven't really talked about this, but I was at Sebring and I got a call from a team basically saying, can I be in the car in a couple of days to fill in for an injured driver at the time for a test? And it was like, basically in my mind, it was almost that I was going to be testing and then racing Long Beach. And that was like incredible, because there was a period of time where I was actually golfing with sponsors of mine, and I started crying on a golf course because I was like, I'm going IndyCar racing. And there was a period where that was my reality. Didn't end up happening. But I had the emotion of like thinking that I had made it to IndyCar. So that was like in some ways gutting, and in some ways more motivation of like how close I was. And from Sebring all the way to Watkins Glen, which was like March to June, basically. Nothing. And then, of course, at Watkins Glen, I got a call from Dale, and it was like, we have a test, are you interested? And obviously, I was super interested. And it was just funny because, like, the only time I was in the car or at a race weekend, which wasn't as much as I would have wanted this year, I would get a call about IndyCar, but I'd spend the months and months and months trying to get something and nothing would happen. So I had the test opportunity with Dale Mid-Ohio, which was pretty fitting actually for me. It was like Mid-Ohio is a track where I've had a lot of success, and it went probably better than I expected. I'd worked so hard to get the chance to drive one that I even felt like just getting my bum in one was like a huge life achievement for me that I could tick off. Like, okay, I drove an IndyCar, because that's something that most people will never get to do.
Hunter became a bit of a Twitter legend in 2024. However, he'll probably be remembered most for the tweet he's about to bring up next. Here's Hunter's thoughts on a tweet that accidentally went viral.
I mean, I guess this is quite topical because of some things we've seen on Twitter about IMSA, etc.
Oh no!
Can you just speak to the fact that you can be content with a career that isn't necessarily an IndyCar, and that having a career in IMSA or the World Endurance Championship can still be a phenomenal thing and can, really build legacies, I guess. So can you just speak to, I guess, that sort of point?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I did a tweet the other day, it blew up, and it was probably taken a little bit the wrong way. I mean, I can see why it did, but for those who don't know, it was I forget, someone posted IMSA sucks or something, right? And I think I said something dumb whatever, get ratioed, and I literally did it as thinking it whatever, and the next day it was blew up. And then I have F1 fans coming at me and all this stuff. And
as we always do, we do love some predictions on a DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast. And here's our reaction to the predictions we made pre-season. Some good, some okay, and some downright awful. Right, so I think it's probably one of the most dramatic moments of the season, where me and Archie are going to look back at what we said in February about our predictions. So we obviously did the sort of more serious ones. Then we did the 10 absolutely completely random ones, which
I don't remember most of them, to be honest. So
and then we have a championship standing. So we'll start off with the champion. You said Scott McLaughlin, which good shout. I was a bit more optimistic and went Pato O'Ward. So you had a good shout. 1 point to you, 0 points to me. You were close.
Yep. I mean, yeah. Stay tuned for my third successive McLaughlin champion call. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, not a bad guess. Everyone was saying Petersburg, you might be right. I was too optimistic, I think. I think my theory was okay, but I didn't. Darren McLaren was strong enough. Rookie of the year, we both said Linus Lundqvist. I think that was fairly obvious. I'm not really taking any pride of that one. But
that was a shoe-in.
Well done. You said surprise is David Malukas. Yeah, no. You're trying to think of a way you can claim this, but I think...
I think... Did we do this the week before his accident? I think possibly.
I believe so, yeah, quite possibly.
I mean, this season was surprising. I think at that point we didn't expect it to get... It was certainly a surprise how everything unfolded, given he was supposed to be racing for Aaron McLaren and ended up fighting for wins for Meyershank Racing. So that's surprising.
I mean, it's worse. I put Pietro Fittipaldi. I think it was probably the least surprising driver all year because he didn't really do too much. So, I'm not proud. That's not as bad as Jack Harvey, but it still isn't very good. Best transfer driver, I mean, the answer is Rosenqvist. You put Ericsson, who arguably was maybe the worst, bar Robb.
More to find.
I put Maluka, so I guess was a good transfer driver, just not the team I was expecting.
He made an extra transfer.
Yeah, exactly. Most improved, you both said Herta. I think we did a cracking job there. So well done.
Very strong.
Indy 500, you put Kirkwood. I put Palou. Again, this isn't really right. You're guessing an individual race, really. But
I was so adamant from the moment that he ended up upside down in 2023, because he was charging at that point. Kirkwood was my just absolute pick from that point. So yeah, didn't quite work out. He had a decent day, I think. But
the winners, we both put Palou, Dixon, Newgarden, McLaughlin, Power, O'Ward, Herta. So that's all 7 points to us straight away. We both put Kirkwood, so that puts us down to 6. We both put Lundgaard, that puts us down to 5. Then I put Lundqvist, and you put Ericsson and Rahal.
Okay.
I think you're a bit too optimistic.
I like that point system, to be fair.
Yeah, I think we got all the winners, though, didn't we? There was no one who won a race who we didn't predict to win a race.
Okay,
I
that's
don't
positive.
think. So... yeah, no, we did. There's 7 winners and we predicted them all. So, good job. If you remember pre-season, we made some crazy, very random predictions for some segments throughout the course of the 2024 season. Now, this footage hasn't been aired yet, so this is an exclusive for the end of year special, but Archie gained a particular knack for one specific driver's predictions. First one was who's going to finish 21st in Iowa Race 2? I said Ferrucci, you said Robb. The answer is no, it's Stingray Robb.
Is it?
Congratulations.
Let's go. That is unbelievable.
fair play. I think it probably goes down from here. Then we had Stingray Robb's best finish of the season. I predicted 14th, and you predicted 9th. His best finish was 9th.
another Robb correct prediction.
This year, we predicted the championship standings bottom to top. Here's our reaction to the top 10 in the standings that we predicted way back in February. Alexander Rossi was 10th. We both put him 11th. Santino Ferrucci was 9th. We put him 22nd and 20th, respectively.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that's really the ones we're going to get the furthest off.
I mean, that again, that kind of shows how impressive his year was, I guess.
Yeah, it really does. Newgarden was 8th. We put him 3rd each. So, yeah, that's not great. Kirkwood was 7th. I put him 9th, and you put him 5th. Scott Dixon was 6th. I predicted him 5th. You predicted him 4th. O'Ward was 5th. You put him 6th. I put him 1st. We go on to Will Power, who was 4th. I predicted him 7th, and you predicted him 9th. It's a bit harsh. It's one
very
for you.
What was I thinking?
Scott McLaughlin, I put 4th. You put 1st. Colton Herter, we put 6th and 7th, respectively. And Alex Pillow, we both put 2nd. This is another prediction that we haven't reacted to yet, but let's cast our minds back to mid-season where me and Archie made this prediction, which proved to be exactly correct. I feel it's a bit of a risk. I'm gonna say Hurt is gonna bag a Toronto or something.
Hurt is my final one, and then Toronto is what I had in mind. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see him steal one of the oval races.
2024 saw the introduction of the Podium Predictor Tournament, which we ran alongside some friends of the podcast. It was very hard to predict the podium week in, week out throughout the course of the season. However, there was one week where somebody got it absolutely spot on.
For the first time in Podium Predictor history, we have a perfect score as Archie predicted McLaughlin, O'Ward, and Newgarden Race 1 and Newgarden, McLaughlin, O'Ward Race 2. But you're the first ever individual to get it spot on. Well done.
Yeah, I was extremely happy when I remember, because I couldn't quite remember which. I knew I'd put that order for one race. I couldn't quite remember which, so I was frantically trying to find my submission. And yep, so it proved. I indeed smashed it. Which was, the happiest I was all weekend because the race didn't necessarily provide the entertainment, but that made it all worth it.
Both the Podium Predictor Tournament and the Fast 6 Predictor Tournament climaxed with a massive finale at Nashville with 2 championships on the line. Here's the final standings after all 17 races had been run in 2024. The moment you have all been waiting for. I know the championship probably wasn't as exciting. This is as exciting. The Fast 6 and Podium Predictor Tournaments, which will be going all season long. We'll start off with the Podium Predictor Tournament. So, points-wise, this week, I went for Dixon McLaughlin Power. Remember, I was a championship leader. That scored me 0.
And I must say at this stage, Dan did show his podium. He did show. He showed it to me because I had such a near insurmountable gap. So bear that in mind when you hear my prediction.
So on that, you went for Newgarden Herter Award. So you got the podium right, but not the right order. So that's 5 points.
Yeah. Because after the race, I didn't realise that Newgarden was on the podium because everything that was happening, Herter getting his win so excitingly, Pillow winning the championship. I knew O'Ward was 2nd. I thought Kirkwood had finished 3rd. And at one point, it was Newgarden, Herter, and then O'Ward was down the order. So, it was close. It was so close.
Writers, Newgarden, Award, Pillow, that's 4. FMS, Power, Dixon, Ferrucci, that's 0. Josh Mason, McLaughlin, Power, Award, that's 2. Tom Gaymore, my biggest contender, Power, Newgarden, Herter, that's 3. Fans, Dixon, Pillow, Rossi, that's 0. And Ellie, Award, Power, Dixon, that's 2. So, the final standings of 2024. In joint 7th, it's Formula Model Shop and the DIVEBOMB followers. They are both on 26. Ellie is in 6th place with 31. Josh Mason is in 5th with 33. Third place, in joint 3rd place, is the DIVEBOMB IndyCar writers and Archie on 41. So therefore, I can crown the winner of the 2024 DIVEBOMB Podium Predictor Tournament as myself. I've done it. I held on by 1 point versus Tom Gaymore.
Tight.
Stinker last week, but I am the champion. I'm delighted. Delightful.
I'm happy to have clawed back a joint third because the deficit was obviously significant after last week.
Now, Fast 6 Predictor Tournament, you lead by 1 point now. This is different because we have not seen each other's predictions. So we fired them away in a form this week.
I'm really nervous about this. My heart is racing.
I've not seen them. So the Fast 6, just so you know, was
Kirkwood, Newgarden, Rosenqvist, Power, Ferrucci, and Malukas.
We'll go on to my predictions first. So I went for triple Penske. So that's Newgarden and McLaughlin done. I went for Malukas.
Newgarden and Power were in the...
Newgarden and Power, sorry. I went for Malukas. So that's an extra point. I went for Rossi, which didn't fare out too well. And I went for Herta. So that's 3. So if you get 2, we'll be joint champion. If you get 3, you will be the champion. You went for Pelot, Power, McLaughlin, Herta, Dixon, and O'Ward. So I think
Can you figure out why I did that?
Top 6 in the standings.
Because I thought qualifying was going to be rained. I was hedging that qualifying would be rained out.
Smart.
I was trying to.
Smart
It wasn't smart. I was trying to hedge. What was the kind of least risky thing to do? And at the point of making predictions, everyone was panicking that there was a hurricane coming. So Hurricane, whatever its name was, has lost me the thing because I would otherwise have put Newgarden.
So yeah, again, I've got to crown myself as the champion. I'm delighted, double champion. That feels good. Pelot can't say they didn't win 2 championships in 1 year, so I can.
Congratulations!
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm a little bit disappointed after a year of predicting to miss out by a point, but it's been a fun battle.
It's been fun. I've enjoyed it. We'll definitely do it again next year. I've got to thank everyone who's played along, like Tom Gaymore, Josh Mason, Fallen Water Shop. You as the fans and the writers, thanks for playing along. Really hope you enjoyed it. I know we certainly did, and long may it continue. One of the ongoing stories in 2024 was the drama over the number 6 Arrow McLaren car, which had been occupied by as many as 4 different drivers throughout the course of the year. This came full circle in Toronto after Théo Pourchaire, who had been dropped a few months earlier, came in to replace the injured Alexander Rossi. We couldn't quite believe this on the podcast, and we reflected on the crazy story of Théo Pourchaire.
Théo Pourchaire. We got chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, I think, to do in this episode. We did a whole episode about him last time, and I think probably, as I mentioned at the start, deserves his own. I mean, we'll start off midweek where a French publication, I won't say a name, but a French publication released an article on Pourchaire, an interview with Pourchaire. There were some interesting claims in there. He said he signed a 3-year contract with Arrow McLaren. It's all in French, was behind a paywall, so you couldn't really read too much into it. But there were also comments about that Arrow McLaren needed funding, was one off the top of my head. And just the interview that he was unhappy that he got sacked by McLaren, which is, somewhat fair. Then he posts a statement midweek, which I'm just getting up now, saying, I've read the article, it's grossly inaccurate, and he says he was surprised that he was taken out by McLaren, but they respected areas of the contract, they're supportive of me, blah, 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 which is retweeted by McLaren. And Tony Kanaan. So Tony Kanaan has, for some reason, decided to take all this situation on himself, argue with everyone on Twitter about it, and completely blow his own reputation. I find this really funny, and we'll probably get to a funny moment. Basically, after Pourchaire's statement, Kanaan retweets and said, Teddy, I'll repeat out loud what we spoke on the phone today, but we will keep between us and put a plan to action soon. This tweet ages in the most funny fashion after Rossi crashes and breaks his hand on Friday. And then Pourchaire's called up. It's like, Kanaan's plan all along was to stop Rossi's car from turning and he could get Pourchaire in and clear up the whole situation. It's obviously not like that at all. But that tweet is rather funny looking into context. But yeah, it felt like a bit of an odd call-up, no? Like he was in France, he was relaxing, and there's a massive rush to get him to Toronto. The word I would use to describe it is reactionary to the events of the week. If it was like, you'd think there'd be more convenient options that McLaren could have taken. And like, if you're going to pick between him and Ilott, surely you'd pick Ilott if you're going to rush somebody over, because at least he's raced at Toronto before, no?
So 3 days before, Tony Kanaan calls Teo Pourchaire at midnight, midnight local time. He'd gone back to France, but he said, I watch every IndyCar session, and I was watching, and I was at a restaurant, and I jokingly said to my girlfriend, maybe I'll get a call from Tony in a few hours. Lo and behold, this happens. So Teo, as he's preparing to go to bed for another relaxing day of his holiday back in France enjoying the French summer, suddenly has to think, how am I going to get to Toronto in 15 to 18 hours to make practice, which he didn't, or make qualifying, which he did, on a track that he didn't know a thing about. So he was sent sort of onboard stuff, data that he basically analysed before he got on a flight at 5 a.m. in the morning.
What happens if he went to bed? A completely different story.
Yeah, probably be talking about, one of the drivers that were on the ground, the more convenient options. We've heard mentions of Oliver Askew. I wrote a piece in anticipation for it being Oliver Askew. That went to pot when Pourchaire was announced. Yeah, it was pretty wild. He had to fly from Nice to Frankfurt, from Frankfurt to Toronto, where he got on a train to get to a car that would take him to the track. Overnight, you had McLaren personnel driving his just racing essentials, basically up from Indy to Toronto. Then, it's a rush. He arrives, I think, 45 minutes to an hour before qualifying. He basically said afterwards, all I want is some air conditioning and some sleep. But to be fair, he had the same smile that we've seen, no matter the roughness of the last month or so of being released. I just think the whole situation is wild. From the interview where, he made these claims, then walking these claims back, how did that happen? It seems like it's some serious breach of sort of journalistic integrity if it is, they've wrongly portrayed him as he suggests. He's now emphasized there's no financial issues, none of this is happening. Yeah, ultimately, maybe it was a case of, Zach Brown said on the Peacock broadcast, he was just the best option, but maybe it was a case of, this wasn't the plan, but it's a plan from TK. So, we'll give him this chance. Maybe we can allow him to showcase himself to other teams, because one thing that Teo said, that Aaron McLaren have tried to help him to get another IndyCar seat or get back into racing somewhere. It was just ridiculous timing after the events of the week, all of that stuff, to then go to Pourchaire of anyone. It's the most
I just think it's so reactionary after. I feel like it was McLaren trying to say, we still do care about Pourchaire. Look at us dragging him to Toronto.
Yeah,
I feel like they could have picked someone like Askew, who was a lot easier, or
100%. They made life very tough for themselves getting. What if Pourchaire? You essentially probably had to have a standby to possibly deputise for the deputy, because of the time was such a narrow window. What if he missed a connection? What if he missed a connection? And then that was the other thing, to throw a driver into qualifying. No matter if he's driven a car or one of their cars recently, he's not driven the hybrid on a road or street course. He's got a different steering wheel. He's having to drive with Rossi's steering wheel. Just throw a driver in to have practice. Like that 45 minutes of practice on Saturday is valuable. So instead, Pourchaire's kind of ambling around doing cycle laps and qualifying, puts himself ahead of Robb, which was impressive in itself. But yeah, did they feel sorry for him? Maybe. Was it worth the hassle? Maybe it was in the end. You've got that, at least some entrant points don't matter to that car, to be honest. Anyway, really, they're in the leader's circle. So yeah, just a crazy story.
At some point, some kind of statement by putting Pourchaire.
A crazy story.
Saying, we all still do get along really. None of this ever happened. We're all good friends.
It's like you couldn't even put it in or write it for a soap opera. Like the timing after this interview, he condemns it and says, that it's grossly inaccurate.
But like at the time, Porsche was clearly upset from what we were like suggested.
Yeah, and he met the media after qualifying and still said he was disappointed, but at the same time he said it feels like family at Aaron McLaren, and the relationships can't be burnt because he wouldn't have agreed to do this. I mean, he said he loves racing, he loves IndyCar racing, he'd love to, if they need him for Gateway, he'll step in willingly. And I love that about him. He'll just do anything. He just wants to be in a car. He loves racing, and I love that about him. But yeah, I mean, there's too much. We've probably missed some nitty gritty.
I still wish you sort of saw Askew because I sort of miss him. But...
Yeah, no, it would have been a good opportunity.
But it doesn't make quite as good of a story, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It's hilarious. I think Kanan's tweet about the plan is just so funny to me. How weirdly it ages.
This wasn't the only funny moment in Toronto. As we've been doing in each post-race show of 2024, we have reflected on some of the funniest moments of the weekend, and Toronto was by far and away the best of those funny moments. Here's the segment of the best funny moments from Toronto, including Chip Ganassi's tweet, Tony Kanan's tweet, and the Aaron McLaren Spider-Man meme.
We've got to find Chip Ganassi's tweet.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I've got it written down here if you want me to read it out. So you mentioned Kanan's tweet. I've been waiting for the Chip Ganassi tweet mention all weekend. I just found it hilarious the way you can imagine the kind of intonation of it. I just found it hilarious the way he basically just announced to the world, yeah, that was our worst qualifying effort. Get in there. It was basically that, ladies and gentlemen, is our worst qualifying effort ever. But this team never gives up. We can win from there. They didn't quite win from there, but they certainly made progress from there with a 3rd, 4th, 5th for their drivers.
Such a funny tweet. He's just so confident in such a bad qualifying result. It was an absolute disaster in qualifying, but I'm so confident in this team despite how bad we were today.
Chip on Twitter, I think it's more spur of the moment. It was just like the way he put it, that, ladies and gentlemen, it's like he's going to be like, oh, we did it. Let's go. We did it. We got our worst qualifying ever. It's like it was an achievement.
My winner, and the one that, I don't know if you probably have seen it, Aaron McLaren did a tweet instigated by David Malukas. If you've never seen the Spider-Man meme, then pointing at each other, you'll need to see that meme for context. But they've got a cardboard cutout of Callum Ilott, and then they got Malukas, Porsche, and Siegel to basically all point at each other with this cardboard cutout of Callum Ilott, obviously all referring to the drivers of the 6 car at some point this year, and it's the most hilarious thing you've ever seen. I mean, it's been a pretty embarrassing saga of McLaren, but they took it on board fantastically and created a rather funny image, and that takes the cake for me this week. McLaughlin's second, the Ganassi third. There's a lot. The only thing that could have made it better is if they somehow managed to drag Palou into the picture.
I just love Chip's tweet too much. That's taking the crown for me. And then it's the Aaron McLaren thing, and then McLaughlin / the irony of Kanan's the plan when we ended it with some plan.
Yeah, I thought McLaughlin's like the person 22C after the plane lands is brilliant. There's so many. So all 4 of them could win on any week, and it's this week they've all decided to come at the same week.
Press conferences made up a huge part of the podcast in 2024. And me and Archie's personal favourite was at Milwaukee when Connor Daly, Pato Ward and Will Power on the podium. Here's our reflections on that absolutely hilarious press conference.
Funny moments, I think press conference 1 takes it for me. I mean, I don't even know what they were on about.
I mean, there are clips. I think that's now been posted by some people on YouTube if you want to go and look. But yeah, I have a piece out where I tried to tell the story of it, but it was just insane. I mean,
I think Daly had a bit too much champagne.
Yeah, I think he had a bit too much champagne. Like when I was looking at the pictures to put the finishing touches on said article, most of them were Daly just either spraying champagne in his face or downing champagne.
His reaction to Mexico was hilarious. He was
like, he had his head in a towel. He had his head in a towel by the end of it. I think the funny thing about Daly is the others could just be talking. He'll randomly interject, and Power too is exceptionally good at sort of changing the conversation. So, we obviously had the should be in Mexico City, the Pato Who moment. But then we had
wedding rings.
They were discussing the whole got that dog. I don't know how they got onto that at all. It was Daly and Pato and Will, bless him, had absolutely no idea what it meant. And he said something about, got that dog, it must mean, oh, they're good drivers at the front. Yeah. And he was like, I don't actually know what that means. Does it mean you can run fast like a dog? It's just unbelievable. And then as Daly, of all people, tries to make, kind of restore order, he's like, right, anyway, this is going great. Power suddenly starts asking him, are you engaged yet? or are you engaged? And then something about, American girls love big rings. And to which Pato said, if you buy a big ring, or if they want a big ring, then I don't know, they don't want you, honey, or something. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I'm still reeling from it. It was insane. It was just tears of laughter listening to that.
A running joke towards the end of 2024 was Archie's love for Rinus VeeKay and his several monologues about VeeKay's performances. Here's where it all started, end of season review, and then a further reaction on the driver tier list to Rinus VeeKay. Maybe that's going to be a running joke into 2025 if VeeKay can get a seat. The most ironic thing of it all is one day after Archie did the first monologue, Rinus VeeKay was dropped by Ed Carpenter Racing. Here's the full story of Archie and the Rinus VeeKay monologue.
And me and Dan were discussing this person off recording. It's actually going to be Rinus VeeKay. He came home 13th in standings, which I know is kind of unremarkable in some ways, but he had so many issues early in the season. I felt like there were points through kind of the early mid phase of the season where we were just talking about this happened to VeeKay, that happened to VeeKay. He had this sort of thing fail on his car. I just felt really sorry for him. And, by the end of the season, he picked up a bit of a head of steam and ended up with 7 top 10 finishes. He only got 2 last year. I mean, Ed Carpenter Racing, let's be frank, they really struggled last year. They were searching for performance. They've been Connor Daly. Okay, I think bringing Ryan Hunter-Reay in maybe did VeeKay some good, but I don't think it really changed anything performance-wise for the team. But yeah, they made a bit of a step forward this year. But I think VeeKay really kind of stood out in the second half of the season for me. I think 5 top 10 finishes in the final 8 races. Didn't finish any lower than 14th in that kind of run of races. Look, in the championship, he ended up beating a couple of pretty decent enough Ganassi cars. Beat Marcus Ericsson. He was only 6 points behind Felix Rosenqvist as well, who I feel like Rosenqvist had quite a lot of misfortune, kind of almost in equal measure to VeeKay in the end. So, he still finished no higher than 12th in the standings. He still finished no lower than 14th in the standings, which I know, Dan, you kind of use this as a stick to beat him with, and you're probably not the only one. But I actually think for a team that's kind of struggled a bit for consistency and performance, that is really good consistency from VeeKay. And I think, unfortunately, his options have kind of diminished elsewhere, and it looks like maybe he could well stay at Carpenter Racing. But I really just want to see him go somewhere else to kind of just see his true level, because what's he going? He's going into his 6th year with Ed Carpenter Racing if he stays there. And that team over the years has kind of been a team where, it's housed drivers to nurture young talents and kind of allow them to develop. And I think ultimately, yeah, they're great at the Indy 500, but they're never going to be a title-winning force. And I'm a big believer that VeeKay would, if it came to it, slot in at a Penske or somewhere and be a front runner and really excel in that role. And unfortunately, while for as long as he stays at Ed Carpenter Racing, we're not really going to see that. But I do feel this year he stepped up pretty nicely as the team leader. And yeah, I mean, he was within a matter of, I think it was 12 points or so of finishing a career best 11th in the standings as well.
Archie, you ready for this one? Rinus VeeKay.
Yes, I am.
Here comes the monologue.
I've done my monologues. Just look back at the season review.
2 hours episode for this one. Yeah, decent season. A decent season. As much as maybe you'll say I'm harsh at VeeKay all the time, but look, I've said this a few times. VeeKay, we don't really notice him. He's there. He doesn't really do much wrong. He doesn't really do anything flashy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But he's just there and he does the right job. I mean, who knows what his IndyCar future's going to look like? Who even knows he's going to be in the field next year?
Yeah.
But he had a decent last season with the team. I think, I say it was his best in a while, fully best since 22, which isn't that long ago. But
I know I've mentioned it time and time again. His qualifying performance after the crash was pretty heroic.
He was the one who crashed it.
He was the one who crashed it, of course. Yeah, of course he was. But at the same time, to then rebound as he did, I think that was super impressive. 7 top 10 finishes compared to 2 last year. So it's a big jump forward. Yeah, I mean, we've exhausted it, haven't we? Talking about him. 13th in the championship.
You've exhausted it. I don't think I have yet.
13th in the championship. Like, again, it's super consistency, really, for a team that has fluctuated so much in performance, I would say. Will he get a seat? He certainly deserves one. But again, it's kind of feels like a Lundqvist situation. He finished inside the top 15 all bar 5 races, including the final 8 races. It was that early season patch that I think really cost him. I mean, he was only 12 points off finishing 11th in the standings. I mean, if it wasn't for all of these mechanical issues and his car constantly breaking down, like, I think he could have. I mean, I'm not saying he would have been in the top 10 fight, but at the same time, he probably would have been a couple of places higher.
Consistent. And as I said, when you're like the most anonymous driver in the series, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Will he find a seat somewhere? Who knows? But
that's so harsh.
Well, it's true. It's true. Him and Fittipaldi, if they disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't even know.
You wouldn't notice.
Respectfully. Like, I don't think it's a bad thing. Yeah, no one monologues for you, Archie, if he goes. So what are you going to do?
It's fine. He'll be back for it. They'd be stupid not to snap him up for Indy, wouldn't they?
We have some crazy ideas on this podcast, and probably none more crazy than the one I had last week during the Christmas special on how Dale Coyne Racing should select their drivers for the 2025 season. So during the off-season, what Dale Coyne Racing should do, as we wait for their drivers, is they should run a sort of about 2.5 month long game show like the Masked Singer to decide their next driver. So it's the masked driver, but everyone watches. They don't know which driver's which. We put them through various tests. It could be singing. It could be, I don't know, it could be rapping, could be racing go-karts, could be cooking. Various tests to see which one is best for the seat. And the watchers can vote, and we will accidentally vote for Dale Coyne Racing's drivers for next year. I think it's a superb idea.
Wow, that is creative. That is indeed creative.
Literally, it's more popularity for Dale Coyne. He definitely gets sponsors for that, and the people get occupied during off season. We've had a direct say in who won the drivers. It's literally a win for everybody. People who don't have any budget, like Rinus VeeKay, we can see his cooking skills, but disguised. It's a genius idea.
That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, exactly. So I came up with it. So, Dale, if you're listening, I'm waiting for the idea. You've had the suggestion. Don't leave until St. Petersburg. Next week, I want to see you start on the show. And we will arrange for drivers if he needs us to. We will sort out personalities. I think it's an excellent idea. So, on a 2 bonus episode on the content days at the very, very start of the year, we had some standout moments. This, a bit more of a bizarre one, Stingray Robb and his pit lane battle of hairstyles. And let's talk about the highlight of his press conference. Someone asked him, with a teammate like Santino Ferrucci, will there be a pit road battle of hairstyles? Stingray Robb's response, I think I need to find an electrical outlet with a fork.
Oh, brilliant. And I think one can only assume that is a reference to kind of seeing Santino's hair as being a little bit messy, because electrocuting yourself is not going to leave your hair in the finest state.
There we are. So, I mean, Stingray's had his own fashion sense. He's spoken. He had some interesting glasses on at the Indy 500 last season. So, Stingray and Santino, but they were both very enjoyable in their press conferences. They both gave very funny vibes. I think they both said they're really looking forward to working with each other. So we'll see how that dynamic works out. And on the next day of content day, I made an interesting vow to Agustin Canapino. I won't be able to pull it off for 2025, unfortunately, but here's that full story.
And we had a little bit of fun with him as well, didn't you, at the end of the press conference?
So, yeah, just for a bit of context, for the foreign drivers, they go to national media, and obviously Canapino had a large presence of Argentine support there. And we'll have a last English question from Dan Jones, live from Motorsport Magazine. Unless you speak Spanish, Dan. The answer is unfortunately not. However, we've made an agreement that me and Agustin are going to have a question next year in Spanish. So, following my journeys, I learned Spanish for next year's IndyCar Content Day. So we all had a bit of a laugh with Canapino about me learning Spanish. So watch the space next year, and we'll see if I can do the podcast in fluent Spanish. Unfortunately, as we said, that won't be happening. And I'll be honest, my Spanish lessons haven't even started yet. And there's about 10 more days until Content Day. So I think I've got some work to do. However, reflecting on that, we got onto more language chat in the podcast, and I made even more commitments that I don't think I'm going to live up to. JP Montoya and Tony Kanaan in the IMS Hall of Fame in the last week or so. So congratulations to them. There's not really too much to say, but
No.
congrats.
Do we know congratulations in Spanish or Portuguese?
Felicitaciones.
Come on, Dan. You should be practicing your Spanish to speak to Canapino next year.
I'll start practicing in January. Augustine learned English overnight, so I might do the same. I'm younger than him. I've got an even better chance. So we'll see. I've still got some work to do, but maybe I should learn every language. I'll start speaking to Rasmussen in Danish. I'll start speaking to who else was there?
VeeKay in Dutch.
VeeKay in Dutch.
Grosjean in French.
That would be fancy. Lundqvist in Swedish. Slow in Spanish.
That could be your target, to learn a question in every language of a driver at Content Day.
What we need to do is get all the drivers on the podcast this year, and I'm just going to randomly whip out. We'll do the entire thing in English, and then 10th question.
Just go through in their language.
That's a really good idea. That was a really good idea. It could go really badly, but it's a really good idea.
Right. Well, what driver do you think has got a hidden talent for speaking a lot of language? Do you think there's a driver out there who secretly speaks Italian or
Grosjean? I reckon Grosjean strikes me as someone who would know loads of languages.
Yes. I mean, Fittipaldi must know quite a few.
True. He spoke on Content Day. He was speaking in Spanish, Portuguese, and English.
Yeah. Well, does anyone know Japanese amongst the paddock? Does anyone? I mean, Carl Larson.
You could know it. Sato comes back. You could know Japanese. That's another one for
You
you
can speak to him as well.
Carl Larson is half Japanese. I think his mother's Japanese, and maybe he knows Japanese. Still waiting for Canapino to come on, and we can do the whole session. I can feel comfortable. One of the funnier off-season segments was me and Archie turning US sponsors into UK equivalents. Here's our reaction to a very traditional British sponsor being selected. When Hunter McElrea ran in Toronto, he didn't really have a primary sponsor, but he did have McDonald's on the side of his car. Now, it isn't actually a McDonald's. It seems to be some franchise of a McDonald's somewhere or other. So, obviously, McDonald's does have quite a global presence, and it does exist in the UK. But for the sake of being different, I had to do it. We've got to go for Greg's. Greg's on the side of a car. That wouldn't a massive sausage roll on the side of the car or something. That's what we like to see. It's got to be Greg's. It's not in America. So, for Americans that don't know, Greg's is like a fast food, like bakery sort of thing. So they've got like sausage rolls on the go, and they've got pastries, and you can buy sandwiches. It's like fast food mixed with a sandwich shop. You get a bit of you get donuts and that sort of thing. So it's got a lot. It's like a bakery, fancy bakery. Would it really be a DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast end-of-year reflection if we don't have at least one Ignacio Montenegro mention? He was a staple throughout the course of 2023, and we managed to shoehorn him into one episode of 2024. Juncos was just... I said Jack Harvey, which again wasn't too bad. And then you went for Ignacio Montenegro.
Well, maybe in the future.
I mean, yeah, maybe. Third entry 2025. Maybe McLaren, if they are in Montenegro, want to give him a go in Juncos. Maybe that's Ignacio Montenegro's path to F1. It's unorthodox, but I think it's impossible. And did a bit more niche bit of content throughout the course of 2024. Here's my NBA IndyCar saga, which happened way back in May. Should we get onto my little saga of the week?
Go for it. Oh, yes, go for it. No, don't go for it. Oh, I don't want to hear.
Do you want to bring up my saga, or
you can bring it up? I've heard enough of this.
So. That brings us on to the power video I found. So
okay,
maybe that's a funny moment. That's a funny moment.
It was 5 years ago, but that's a funny moment.
It's still funny. My basketball team, the New York Knicks, have been playing the Indiana Pacers in the NBA playoffs this week. And obviously being Indiana and Indianapolis, all the drivers support the Pacers, apart from Scott McLaughlin. So me and McLaughlin have been residing on the New York Knicks this week to try and win. And they've been speaking about it quite a lot on the broadcast, actually. Kevin Lee mentioned it in practice. I think Connor Daly mentioned it yesterday before they played their final game. So I've been angry this week finding out all these drivers are massive Indiana Pacers fans, and there's loads. Daly, Award, Herta is a big Pacers
Ericsson,
fan.
Lundgaard are up in there as well.
Ericsson, like everyone. I haven't done my research yet, but I will give you a definitive list one day of who's Indiana Pacers fans, who's part of those dodgy human beings supporting the Indiana Pacers. The Knicks ended up losing, so my week was compounded by a 4-3 loss. And so all the New York Knicks got injured, and I think McLaughlin lost a bet because he was saying he was supporting the Pacers from now on or something, and without touching on the Knicks. But anyway, as part of my extensive research this week, I've been doing some interesting looking. If you didn't know, the Pacers player Tyrese Halliburton drove the Indy 500 pace car last year. It was announced today as some baseball player.
And when
Ken Griffey Jr.
When they had that NBA sort of All-Star event where Connor
All-Star,
Daly took part of the in the charity game, he drove Tyrese Halliburton to the actual All-Star game in the two-seater because I think it was in Indy.
Yes.
So that's another link.
Yeah. Anyway, I've been scoundering around Twitter this week at various different nonsense trying to find out who's part of those cults who support the Pacers. We came across this absolutely fantastic video of Will Power just in the stands, like playing these drums with these Pacers ultras, and honestly, it's one of the best videos I've seen in a long time.
Because he plays the drums, doesn't he, Will Power? I'm pretty sure he plays the drums. Colton does something else in a band, doesn't he?
The Zibs.
Because Power Thermal, when they had the party beforehand, he was playing the drums, wasn't he? Because he didn't know the song. I remember the story. I can't remember what the song was, but he's like a bit of a genius on the drums. So he was playing the drums and like picked it up immediately, whatever the song was. So yeah, Will Power's a drummer. Colton Hurst is in a band. If you didn't know,
I think Archie retweeted it. So look on Archie's Instagram.
You might have to look back quite far. But
you might have to look back quite far because this video of Will Power playing the drums and in the Pacers stands is quite funny. But I will give some definitive research next week once I've recovered from the Knicks losing. So annoying, frustrating week. And with all the guests we had on in 2024, the most important recurring question was the 2 songs that they wanted to add to the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast driver playlist. Here's a collection of all the songs that the drivers selected throughout the course of 2024.
So to finish off, as we get more drivers on, we're trying to make a playlist with a couple of songs from each driver. Could you please give us 2 songs that you would like us to add to the playlist?
Can I have some examples of what's been added so far?
Stingray Robb added some old American country song from well before he was born.
Yeah.
So just anything. I think Tom Blomqvist said some sort of hype song that he listens to in the gym.
So I actually got into country music in the last 3 months. So there's one which is Straight and Narrow by Sam Barber. I like that, but I'm not going to go with my second one for country.
Opening up the Spotify rap to see number 1 from last year.
No, I haven't opened mine just out of the shame of doing so.
Not putting it on your story, don't fancy?
No, I haven't done that. I'm sure some fans are disappointed in me for that. Hang on, give me a second. This is going to take a bit longer.
All adds to the anticipation. For any listeners,
Avicii.
Any songs?
Yeah,
Any
any
songs.
songs. Could be anything.
Any songs?
I will
Both
add
on the spot.
my bird-related song of "Fly Away" and "Californication."
Cool.
Nice, thank you very much.
Close to home, that last one.
I better have a look at my Spotify.
I think this is every driver's first answer. I better look at my Spotify.
It changes a lot. Oh man, I would feel like I'd put. It's kind of funny. I'd put "Apple" by Charlie XCX because I just have to.
Yeah. I've seen the Twitter coverage of that.
Yeah, and then I would put "Waiting for Tonight" by Fisher.
Okay,
Awesome.
cool. The question that I always ask as well, having moved to the US, have you got into country music?
No, brother.
No. It's always very mixed responses.
I have to say, I appreciate what they do. Like, it's just I just can't hack it. I have dabbled in a bit of Morgan Wallen every now and then the people are like, that's not country music, and it's like, okay. A few of Morgan Wallen's songs, I'm like, it's not that bad actually, but I can't really hack it. I don't know. It's just I don't want to be disrespectful. Like when I go to Nashville, man, I get it. I'm all about it. Cowboy hat on, you blend in, right? Like when in Rome. But I will sometimes blast Morgan Wallen, I will admit, but it's not often. So I wouldn't say there's any other country artists I'd probably listen to. But I'm not a hater. I don't really. It's not my thing. It's like like rap music or whatever. It's just I don't know. It's not my favorite.
Yep, fair enough.
Famax by Rafa Guido. I think it's how you pronounce it. And the other one is Hot Since 82, and the song's called Eye of the Storm.
Okay, cool. That'll go well.
They're the ones I can think off the top of my head.
That'll go well with Stingray Robb's old country music from like the 80s. So
okay, so that's one thing that I really am not a fan of is country music. I can't get behind it. I hear it and I appreciate it, but I just really don't like it.
Callum Ilott had some, I think. Tom Blomqvist was more modern house rap sort of stuff. Yeah. So
okay, that's fine. I can get along with Tom.
Okay.
That's the privilege you get now. This is the biggest thing about being an IndyCar driver.
Right. Let's have a look at my my Spotify, shall we? Because I can't think of two off the top of my head. We'll do let's do Toto. Sorry. Toto Africa.
Yep.
That one's a good one. Love that one. And then we'll do exclamation mark by Usher.
Okay.
I mean, one thing I was going to say is, a few of the drivers, especially Callum Ilott, he was speaking about he's really got into country music since going over to the US. Is that something you have at all gained an interest in or not?
A little bit. I do like the sound of it. I still have yet to get into it. Like I wouldn't mind like whenever it plays, I'm not like turn it off. Like it's cool. I like the music. But to say I sit there in my car myself and listen to it, no. Let's put it that way. But no, I do enjoy it, and I think it's got a lot bigger as well over the last kind of 2 years or so. It's got pretty massive. It's kind of almost become pop in a way, as very popular to listen to. And yeah, I think when you're in places like Nashville and Tennessee and Alabama and stuff like that, it's a lot more common. So it's fun music to listen to for sure.
You said you're a fan of Luke Combs, didn't you, Iowa?
Yes, I did watch him. I was a little bit shocked at first. I was like, "Oh my god, what is this?" But it was cool to watch him live, and obviously there's tons of fans who will love him. So you kind of get a feeling of why it's so popular over here.
I was a big fan of the IndyCar socials. Everyone's speaking about their season. Alex Palou's winning the championship, and you're allowed to sing Luke Combs was the favourite bit for me. So maybe chuckle a little bit.
I don't listen to all that much music, so I don't know like lots of songs or anything. But if you don't have it on there already, you should definitely add Life is a Highway.
And that's it. That's all the clips from 2024. Hopefully you enjoyed some of those clips. Some funny, some weird, some serious, a little bit of everything, just like this podcast. Now I'm going to hand back to Pastan and Archie to get their final reflections on 2024. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode, and I really hope you've enjoyed the past year of content. We'll go over this a bit more at the very end, but we do our best each week and to do this for you guys, and we do. I'll say we enjoy it. We struggle along.
Yeah, it's good fun, and I mean, we hit a milestone this year, didn't we? With 50 episodes. That feels a long while ago now, because we are well on our way to 100. And I hope we're just bringing kind of a fresh perspective to maybe a new audience. Maybe you're an existing fan, but we try and make it accessible for all. And being British, we're hoping to maybe help to drive the growth of the series over here in the UK. But I hope we've managed to kind of bring you closer to the action this year, and it's been a real pleasure, and it's been great fun, I think, bringing you the podcast over well, the last 12 months, but also getting on for nearly 2 years now. I mean, I think generally for us being accredited for a first season as media is the thing that really stands out for me kind of as a whole, both spanning podcast and kind of the written stuff that we do, because I think we got that kind of late 2023, but that was obviously post-season. So this was the first season where we could really bring you all of these stories and just kind of get a bit closer to what's going on in the IndyCar world. I think for me personally, I really enjoy that storytelling side of journalism. And I think that's kind of been brought to the podcast this year through kind of hearing more from drivers and having that bit more access. I would like to think we've brought a bit more insight this year as well. I mean, we've certainly had more driver views for you to kind of consume from various press conferences through the year, and obviously the interviews we've had on the podcast as well. I think it's been great to kind of tell those lesser told tales as well. I personally really enjoyed the likes of Hunter McElrea and Toby Sowery just having kind of feature length episodes, more extended interviews with them, but also the rest of the interviews as well. However long or short they may have been, I think every one of them was really, really insightful. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed. So I think just being that bit closer this year and being able to kind of convey that to you, I mean, it's been a privilege for us speaking to the majority of the field.
Do you have like a favorite episode or some standout episodes? It's probably a better question to be related to the podcast. I think yet again, the Christmas special, if you haven't listened to it already, one of my favorite yearly episodes, was superb.
I always really like the season review because I think we do it very well in the way that, I mean, obviously we have the driver tier list, which again is also super enjoyable. But I quite like the way that we do our review episodes, whether it's mid-season, post-season. I think kind of having these key headings rather than just, I think it would be a bit boring almost if we just went through it and went team by team, or yeah, just I think the way that we do it by picking out our driver of the season, essentially giving like awards. I always really enjoy that episode. I think off-seasoning is great. I think we kind of balance out the boring off-season with a lot of fun on the podcast. I mean, we're now down to below 60 days until the season starts. We're inside 2 months now, so we're getting there. The time is coming close. I think it feels like it's gone pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's standout episodes. Obviously, the interviews are always the ones that you look back on most fondly. But I mean, there's never a dull episode, is there? I always love the race reviews.
Some standouts for me: IndyCar Tenable, I thought was an excellent episode right at the start of the year. And we had the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Rims podcast, which was a bit of a funky episode. So that's a good one to listen to. The predictions one, just looking back at how awful that was, that's great. Good reviews. I think the thermal review was actually quite good. Has some really good insight there. IndyCar Millionaire, that's another really good episode from this year. Alabama, it was a great race review.
Toronto was the one that we recorded in almost 3 different continents. That was good fun. I was in a sweltering hot kitchen in a holiday home in Mallorca. That will be remembered for a while. I thought Iowa was good as well because it was a bad weekend in terms of racing, but it gave us an awful lot to talk about. I thought
that was on my midsummer tour as I travelled around the entire European continent. That's when I was extremely ill. So if you listen back to the Iowa episode, I was absolutely. I was in a terrible state, but we got through the episode. I thought the bonus episode for Rinus Siegel, really good episode. I did enjoy that this year. Some of the biggest news of the year. That was a really fun episode as well, I have to say. Next year, listeners, we will actually sort of top this up and go through the year with our favourite moments, and then we'll actually compile it all rather than this sort of messy ending where we've just chucked absolutely anything and everything at you. But I mean, hopefully you've sort of got a good establishment of what's happened during the course of the last hour and a half of sort of our best moments of the year. You've obviously had 17 plus thermal races to review, which was super fun, and obviously all the off-seasoning content. And as much it is a struggle sometimes, as much as you can probably tell we're pulling ideas out of absolutely nowhere, they are quite fun to do. And hopefully, if it makes your off-season a bit more enjoyable and gives you a weekly reminder of IndyCar, that's all we're looking for, really. So, bit of fun. Yeah.
And before you know it, we'll be back in prediction and previewing season. That's coming up soon.
It is. Certainly is. Dale Coyne still got some drivers to announce, so we've still got some stuff to do. So we've done 57 episodes this year, believe it or not. 57 episodes. Maybe we'll beat that next year. Maybe we're at 50. Yeah, 57. No, 58. 58 episodes this year. So
We
that's
should
a
hit
lot of episodes.
We should hit 100 pretty early in the year.
To end off, we probably do need to give some thank yous throughout the course of the year. I think, first of all, let's thank the drivers who came on. We obviously had Callum Ilott at the start of the year. We've had Toby Sowery, Hunter McElrea, Kyffin Simpson, Nolan Siegel. We've had Louis Foster a couple of times as well. So obviously they live very busy lives. So really appreciate all of them for giving up their time to speak to us and giving you exclusive insight, which you may not have had otherwise. And for obviously all the people at the relevant teams who do organise us to make these sort of things happen, because we get a great experience out of them. We get great insight. Hopefully you get an insight into the lives of some IndyCar drivers.
I was just going to give a special thanks to Louis Foster, who we have dragged on at short notice. Now on, well, 2 occasions off, kind of just dragging him on after the initial interview. So that needs a particularly special thank you.
Absolutely. We've had a couple of guests on this year. So James Scott, who joined us for the end of year review, and then Fleur, who joined us for the driver tier list. Great to have both of you on. Thank you for joining the podcast this year. Thanks to all of the people at IndyCar who made this happen, as obviously Archie touched on earlier, as our first year, sort of giving you these exclusive press behind the scenes things and giving you a bit more insight to what happens during a race weekend. So Dave, Arnie, and all the bros at IndyCar, thank you for your work. Our friends at Formula Model Shop, thank you for running us some giveaways across the course of the year. If you didn't join in, you are absolutely missing out on some awesome giveaways. And just a reminder, use the discount code 5BOMB for 5% off at checkout. Gets you a nice little discount there with the partnership that we have with Formula Model Shop, which we're very grateful for the team for running that. And Ellie, who obviously was on the podcast for the majority of the year, we thank her for her time and giving up her time for the podcast and helping us too every single week. Archie, I'd like to thank you very much for being my co-host throughout the course of the season. 57 episodes, 58 episodes. Been a pleasure.
And Dan, I would also like to thank you, because listeners, Dan does all of the dirty work with the editing at usually an ungodly hour, the day before the podcast is released.
Well, technically the day of the podcast, many a time.
Yeah, technically so. So a massive thanks to Dan for heading this all up. The one time I was relied upon to edit when I did my solo Indy 500 Media Day podcast, it was a right pain. So I have a massive amount of respect for the work that Dan puts in for the podcast and DIVEBOMB beyond that as well.
We have some fun chats on this podcast, so long may it continue. Long may more nonsense come out of mouths and awful IndyCar opinions and all the rubbish we come out of each week. But look, some of you keep listening every week. We have no idea why. But that leads us on nicely to thank you, the fans who have listened this year. We've seen some great increase in podcast numbers this year. I mean, Callum Ilott hit over 1,000 views, which was absolutely superb. And seeing the numbers grow each week, seeing so many of you listening to the podcast each week is fundamentally what keeps us going. And we really enjoy making this content. It gives us an opportunity to speak about IndyCar every single week, gives us some opportunities to spurt out some absolute nonsense, which you'd never find elsewhere. But hopefully, I mean, some of you must enjoy it because you come back every single week. So we really appreciate you for listening to the podcast, for watching the podcast. And we do our best to make it enjoyable, whether you're a new fan, whether you're a veteran, whatever it may be. Hopefully our perspective of the sport, especially from our British standpoint, comes across a little bit to you from our world. So we really do appreciate you listening to the podcast. We appreciate the support, and please continue listening into next year. You're always very welcome to get in touch with the podcast via Instagram, via X, whatever you want to contact us on. Let us know. We'd love to speak to a few of you, and if you've got any other friends getting into IndyCar, show the podcast. Let's help the podcast grow even bigger and better in 2025. But hopefully we're going to have an absolutely superb year ahead. Hopefully let's have a few more drivers on this year. Let's hope so very much, and hopefully more fantastic content. Hopefully an excellent season of racing ahead. And I think for our reviews of 2024, that is very much it. So thank you very much for watching. We thank you very much for listening. And we hope we'll have an excellent 2025 season ahead.